I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this is Outside My Window.
We've been able to benefit from having local students come to our location here at the Yarmouth campus, and we benefit from their clinical placements. And we hope that through this experience that they want to stay right here in Yarmouth, work at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital, or within the tri-counties at the hospitals in Shelburne and Digby as well, because having them train here, do their clinical placements here is such a tremendous benefit for our current staff, for our patients, and hopefully for the students themselves. We have found in our recruitment processes that, if you're more likely to retain someone in the workforce if they are actually from the area. And that's why the retention part of recruitment is so important, that we want people to feel like they're from here, that we want them to feel settled, to feel welcome. But if you're already from here originally, being able to train and serve in your local community, you understand the culture, you understand the community. And we're very diverse here in southwestern Nova Scotia with our Acadian culture, Mi'kmaq and First Nations, and African Nova Scotian. We're a very diverse community here in southwestern Nova Scotia, and people from this area understand that and can relate to it, and I think, serve as, perhaps better healthcare providers because of it.
And that was Fraser Mooney, the communications advisor for Nova Scotia Health at the Yarmouth Regional Hospital, giving us a bit of insight into his angle as far as the advantage of having the Yarmouth School of Nursing so adjacent to the Yarmouth Regional Hospital. And now we're going to pick up on part 2 of our interview with the Yarmouth Dal School of Nursing. So we've kind of talked in reverse. We've talked about the role and we've talked about the progression of the role, but let's take a step backwards and talk about admission. So, when you're coming out of high school, you don't have a lot of experience, obviously, but you want to make sure you get the right courses to get yourself where you need to go. So what are the qualifications for admission, and then what?
Well, our students, before they get here, they must complete at the grade 12 level academic math, English, biology, and chemistry. Those courses are required. The math is always a question. Students want to know, because it's a Bachelor of Science in Nursing program in Halifax or other universities. When you enter a Bachelor of Science program, you typically have to have pre-calculus. That's not the case for nursing. Nursing, you need academic math. However, that being said, I do say to students, if you are not quite sure if nursing is your path, and possibly think that you might pursue something else, then you probably should take the pre-cal. But if you're sure that nursing is your path and math is not your strong suit, then stick with the academic grade 12 math, and hopefully you'll do fine and meet the requirements to get in. What else do you want to add to Shelley?
Maybe a bit about the grade 11 early acceptance marks would be helpful.
Go ahead, yeah.
So students can apply in the fall. Our applications open in October of each year for the following academic year. And students can apply once they've completed grade 11 and they've just started grade 12 before they have any marks. And it's important people know that, because often students will wait until they get first term marks, and that's not the case. If they meet our requirements with grade 11 marks, then they're offered a pre-entry seat, meaning if they maintain and ensure they meet our minimum requirements throughout grade 12, that seat is theirs. So that's important, I think, for students entering grade 12 to know about.
Very important to know, yeah, that those grade 11 marks are actually quite important.
And we're also hoping with our Explore Yarmouth campus that we can target like grades 7 and 8 earlier in their education, to be able to, come into the school, see what nursing is, what we can offer, and also what the requirements are that may be to lead on that path earlier as opposed to later. But it's never too late to upgrade, and we've got our alternative high schools within TCRCE, and encourage students that's at any time can upgrade if they to meet the requirements.
I mean, certainly you start picking your courses in grade 10, so it's good to get in ahead of time on that. I know that when my son was prepped to go into 10, there was a big meeting with the parents and the TCRCE to go over making sure that they were picking the right courses for their path. My son didn't know what he wanted to do, so it's like, all right, what do you pick? Do you pick the quote unquote easy path, or do you pick something that's going to challenge them as they go through? There's a lot to think about. Way more than what it was, Shelley, when you and I went through high school. I mean, sure, we were picking courses, but it wasn't a formal layout like that. It wasn't as stressful. The stress came later when you found out that, oh, you should have taken academic math and you didn't, right? So qualifications are one thing, but it costs a lot of money to go to school. So what sort of basic financial assistance is available? Does it fall under the standard quote unquote student loan type system? And we talked a little bit earlier about bursaries and scholarships and the like, but what sort of financial assistance are available for the students coming in?
Well, I'll start with what's local, and then maybe, Joanne, you can talk a bit about Dal Money Matters. So, as I said, locally, the Yarmouth Hospital Foundation is an amazing support of our program. So they have 9 scholarships. Then we add the 3 bursaries from the hospital auxiliary. Then we add the new 8 scholarships. So now we have 20 scholarships for 33 students. And those are just Yarmouth campus students. And as Jackie said before, that there are other entrance scholarships that are automatically looked at for Dalhousie, as well as some of our diversity deserving groups as well. And I know Joanne, as the advisor, does some work with Pamela Goodwin, who is the financial advisor at Dalhousie.
Yes, students who apply to Dalhousie, they also qualify, or they do qualify, for all the Dalhousie scholarships that are available to them as well. So I guess our learners have a little bit of a bonus that way. They have the traditional university scholarships offered by Dalhousie, but they also have these local scholarships as well from our community who proudly support this program. Also, being a Dalhousie student means you also have all the access to all the Dalhousie resources that are out there. And many of those resources are very accessible online, and COVID has certainly helped with that. So that's one of the positive things of the pandemic, is that the accessibility to information and getting that information to the students is happening. So Money Matters is a site that students can go to and actually even make a request to speak to a financial advisor who might help them with, either their income tax as a student learner or accessing other pockets of money that they might be entitled to. So it is a wonderful resource for our students.
I know that recruitment is not an issue for the School of Nursing. I mean, they're beating down the doors, if I can use that expression, which speaks volumes about the reputation of this school and of the Yarmouth Regional Hospital. But there are 33 seats. What is the selection process? How do you determine which nursing candidates are selected?
It has changed over the years, and right now, equity, diversity, inclusivity, and accessibility are very important to Dalhousie University, as well as Nova Scotia Health. Very important. So we have an equitable admissions policy, which means that if a student self-identifies as any one of various equity-deserving groups on the application form, and they meet our minimum entrance requirements, they would be offered a seat on our roll in admissions. So our applications open near the end of October. Near mid-December, everybody that's applied is looked at, and at that point, seats are offered to students. And then the next roll would be after January, and then I think the next offer is the end of May.
And also the CASPER test comes into there too, Shelley, if you don't mind mentioning it.
That's right. The other part of admission, which we changed in the fall of 2016, is up until 2016, admissions was based totally on academic grades. And we know, as seasoned nurse educators, that there are some students that have to work very hard in our theory classes and struggle to get the minimum marks. And then they walk into a hospital and they just shine. They're just amazing nurses. So we looked at that, and not just our campus, but Dalhousie we call our mothership, as well as Cape Breton University and St. Avex. We all work and collaborate very closely together. So what we looked at is we're putting everything on academics. What about their judgment, their ethical comportment, kind of, how they see the world? We can't interview because there's just way too many applicants. And an interview, again, is one time in space. Some people interview great, others don't, that could be great nurses. So what we settled on, and many schools across the country use this, medical schools, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and nursing, is called a Casper test. And it's a situational judgment test. The student pays $40 to take it. It's done online, and it shows different situations and various video clips that they then respond as to what they would do. So now we have the academic average, or a grade point average, depending upon if the student has university or not, is 60% of a score, and then the Casper, or their situational judgment, makes up 40% of the score. So these students are ranked differently, and we have been watching this every year because we want to ensure we're not disadvantaging, for example, our Francophone students or any students from non-traditional student groups. So, and what we're finding is, in fact, there's some advantages, because maybe high school was difficult for them, maybe they had other responsibilities and their academic mark maybe wasn't as high, but their situational judgment put them higher up on that priority list. So, and we do keep our hand on that pulse every year for all of our applications at Dalhousie, not just the Yarmouth campus.
So if somebody applies to the Yarmouth campus as their quote-unquote preference, but aren't selected, does that application get shuffled into other areas or other campuses that might be available to them, or would they have to apply to that one specifically, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, on our application form, there is a box, and the box says Halifax campus or Yarmouth campus. So you do click where you would like to go. But, Halifax students who have not got into the Halifax campus have been offered seats in Yarmouth. So that has happened in the past. But once you do accept a seat in our campus, then you stay for the entirety and you complete your degree at this site.
And we've had some great success stories of students that maybe wanted Halifax campus and they filled up before we did. They were offered a seat here. And we just actually had one graduate that had no intentions of staying here and has now signed for a permanent full-time position here because they fell in love with the community and the school and the atmosphere. So there are those definite success stories, because at one time we thought, how can we watch our admissions so they're just from the Tri-Counties? And actually it was Jackie that looked at me with an equity lens and really said, is that fair? And no, it wasn't fair. So, and we didn't do it. So that didn't come to be, and no, it's not fair. So back to beating down the door, we do have 33 seats, and we had almost 400 applications last year for the Yarmouth campus for those seats. So I think we're pretty popular.
Do people, when they graduate, typically stay in their home communities, or do they kind of move on? Are you tracking that sort of thing? And then do we still have a problem with rural Nova Scotia and staffing?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do still have a recruitment and retention problem. It's the first time, really, Yarmouth Regional Hospital, Tri-Counties have had to deal with this in probably 100 years. And it's national, so it's not just us. It's international, it's global. And there's so many incentives for competition, for traveling nurses and to go other places, that we really have to be competitive to keep our nurses here. With that said, up until the pandemic, we don't have our stats from the last couple of years, but we will soon. We do identify how many of our graduates stay within the Tri-Counties, and then the Western region, and then the province. Generally, it's been about 75-78% within the Tri-Counties, just over 85% in Western, and about 95% in province. So Nova Scotia doesn't lose that many of the Yarmouth campus graduates if we consider the province as a whole.
And I think that speaks to Marty Amiro's study back in the 80s. People who are from the area typically want to stay in the area, so we're fortunate that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that the School of Nursing is actually connected to the Yarmouth Regional Hospital, it's got to be a huge advantage, and it is a bit unique in us chatting before we went to tape. So how how much of an attraction is that for somebody applying into the Dalhousie School of Nursing here in Yarmouth?
Well, going to Dalhousie myself and having to line up for registration and speaking to your professor sometimes required a great deal of effort to get from point A to point B. I think our students, do enjoy the fact that the residents and their classrooms and their simulation labs are all in the same building. It's pretty shopping kind of thing. And being connected to the hospital via a tunnel, allows them to quickly bump over to the cafeteria to get a bite to eat or a snack, and then be right back in the classroom 15, 20 minutes later. So that is advantageous. And if you think the students who live in residence, if they certainly don't feel like cooking one night, well, the cafeteria food is not that bad. It's quite good.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize we have that underground tunnel. So, in those snowstorms, our students can make it to clinical. Now, we might have an issue coming in from outside, or even rainstorms, it is very advantageous in that way. But not only that way, because I think on the flip side of the coin, Gary and Quinn, we also have elevated education in the area. So we have an amazing learning center that is now in our hospital that may or may not have been there without a requirement to be accredited to have a school of nursing. We have a lot of clinical nurse educators that come over and we collaborate with. We're able to pull on some of the experts in the fields to come into our classrooms, both nurse practitioners and physicians. So I think that connection, and plus we have a good relationship. When I walk through the hospital, and I think we can all say this, there's very few nurses we don't know.
Absolutely.
And there's very few nurses that haven't somehow had a connection to either the Diploma School of Nursing or the Baccalaureate School of Nursing. And I think case in point, we recently went to an employee recognition event for our admin person here, Rose Clemens, was celebrating 25 years, and Jackie was celebrating 35. And what we noticed at that recognition celebration is that so many of the people being recognized were previous graduates. So in fact, in the end, we had asked Fraser Mooney if he would take a picture of all the Yarmouth School of Nursing / Dalhousie campus graduates at the end, and we did get a group picture, but it gives a nice feeling of pride, again, to walk through and see those Yarmouth grads.
Absolutely, it does.
I think it's wonderful that, when an older grad who's now working in the clinical area becomes a preceptor, they are familiar with our program. They know what the expectations are for a particular clinical experience because they lived it themselves. So that's a win-win situation, that the preceptor is also a Dal grad, the student is a learner from Dalhousie, so it's a great partnership.
Yeah, and it's a great feeling, and a little bit hard to believe when you're looking at seeing your former students being recognized for 15 years of service and 20 years of service and 25. Yeah,
I think it hit when we had our first student of a student we had. Or sorry, the first daughter of a student that we had, and that was like, whoa, we have.
Yeah, and that has happened a couple of times now. So.
Nova Scotia has, as you know, expedited the licensing process for internationally trained nurses, and according to all the reports, the applications are really pouring in. Now, the nurses obviously are already trained, but is there a role for the Yarmouth campus to play in perhaps some type of orientation maybe for these international nurses?
I certainly hope so, Gary, and I think I hope it's more than just orientation. So the program you're referring to is called the NICHE program, which is the Nova Scotia International Community of Healthcare Workers Engagement Program. Well, that's a mouthful. That's why we call it NICHE. And it's a collaboration of Nova Scotia Health and other partners. With the recent announcement from our Nova Scotia College of Nurses, so they announced that as of May 1st, any registered nurse and licensed practical nurse, although different terms in different countries, that wants to come to practice in Canada, there's a new, more expedient registration process. And this includes countries Australia, India, New Zealand, Nigeria, Philippines, the UK, and the USA. So a lot of different countries. They've had over 1,100 applications since May 1st, and part of this program, the NICHE, is to really work So up until this time, it took a minimum a year to have an internationally educated nurse, and frustrating for them. They're maybe a registered nurse in their home country, and here they come here, and they have to do a long education program, housing, like so many barriers. So those barriers have basically been removed. Some of these nurses are able to be licensed in a matter of weeks. So what we're hoping is a couple of things, and we're in collaborations and talks with the Interprofessional Practice and Learning Group. Dr. Cindy McQuarrie is the director of that, and we fall under that department in Nova Scotia Health. And what we're hoping is that we not only have them in our classrooms here using our space in our simulation lab, but we're also hoping to provide them with residence accommodations to help that housing transition. So they can come here, we can do whatever types of programming. We're working with IPP&L. Nothing's finalized, it's beginning talks, but we're very open to assisting in any way we can in relation to preparing internationally educated nurses for our communities in all of Nova Scotia. We're excited about it, actually.
It's not a unique thing, because I mean, certainly that would extend to doctors and other healthcare professionals as well. Are they expanding that?
Yeah, actually, the Nova Scotia Society, Doctors Society, did this a couple of years ago, and there were internships. And we have Dalhousie also has the family practice residency program here. So there's some good collaborative opportunities there as well. But I mean, of course, we're nursing, so we focus on nursing. But again, excited about the prospects of what we can contribute and help with the current healthcare crisis, and it really is a crisis.
And not to jinx it, but how portable is the Canadian nursing license in other countries? Does it work as well in reverse for us as it does for them coming in?
I can't answer that, Quinn. I'm sorry. What I can answer, though, is that Nova Scotia took the lead on IE, internationally educated nurses registration. You may have seen on the news recently that New Brunswick is quickly following suit, but they've also done portability within Canada, which is nothing we had. So if for example, I started my career in Alberta, I had to be licensed in Alberta. My Nova Scotia license, I couldn't just transfer out.
Oh, really?
That's correct. So Nova Scotia has again taken the lead, and now if I was coming from Alberta into here, I could transfer in. So just trying to drop those barriers related to transferability and portability within our country, and now extensively to other countries. And with USA prepared nurses, we write the exact same North America licensure exam. So there's a lot of portability there, but I can't talk to, I know in my day you had to write state boards and get licensed in separate states, and I'm not sure if that's changed or not since the NCLEX came in.
Pardon my ignorance, but it just seems kind of foolish that province to province within your own country, that nursing is not nursing from where you stand, and not to stir the pot, poke the bear, or whatever you want to call it, but just seems to me like that's just ridiculous.
Well, I can't disagree with you. As much as I'd like to, I can't. And I think, I mean, every province has its own licensing body, and there's different requirements. There were different requirements. So, for example, in Nova Scotia, in order to become licensed, you had to take a Nova Scotia jurisprudence exam. They've dropped that regulation, and it's up to each nurse to know what our jurisdiction differences are. So I'm hopeful in the next few years you'll see that portability, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we've always questioned why there hasn't been a Canadian licensing body across our country, but there hasn't. In fact, we have a satellite campus at Arctic College, so Dalhousie has a satellite campus up there, and I had the great fortune of being the coordinator for a few years. However, when I was on site, if I taught, I had to be licensed with the Northwest Territories Registered Nurses Association. So there's still some barriers that we need to work on, but I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel across our country, and hopefully it continues.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you had mentioned earlier about the potential to accommodate more than 33 seats, but is that a realistic expectation within a couple of years that you'll be able to accommodate more? And do you have the space? This is an older building.
This is an older building in preparation. So we did do a needs assessment because the number one thing we need to be able to guarantee is that our students get clinical practice, because they can learn lots in our classrooms and our STEM labs, but nothing replaces actual clinical practice. So we're fortunate to have Digby, Shelburne, and Yarmouth hospitals. We utilize all 3 hospitals, and we're welcomed with open arms into the hospitals. We use our long-term care centers, our vets unit, some of the manors in Digby, Shelburne, Metagan. We've done the analysis, and yes, we can safely expand with additional resources in-house. Prior to, in the diploma program, we had a 2-year program, and we usually took in 45 or 50 students a year. So that would be about 100 students. Now, granted, our units were a bit bigger then. However, right now, with taking in 33, that puts us right around 100 students. And we could safely, according to my needs assessment, go up another 8 seats, 7 or 8 seats, if the government sees the need, and I think they absolutely will. It's just a matter of, there's been lots of expansions this year, so we certainly don't want to expand and not fill seats, because that would be a certain issue. But again, with over 400, almost 400 applications last year, I'm not worried if we do. So stay tuned. I might be able to call you in a week or in a year, but we're ready if we need to.
You know, as we sit here in this School of Nursing, I can't stop thinking about all the bright young minds that are here in this building, or perhaps in the hospital setting, who have decided to dedicate their lives to the care of the sick and injured and elderly. A lot of textbook learning, a lot of classroom learning, of course. But one thing I was thinking, how do you teach how to be a good nurse in the sense of being comforting and reassuring? And that's one thing that has always amazed me. Anyone, I'm sure, who has had experience. I remember when I was just a child in the old Yarmouth hospital, and I had to get my tonsils out. And after my parents went home, I cried. I wanted to go home. And the nurses, I still remember, even though he's quite young, how comforting they were, and they made me feel better. The day I walked into the emergency room and I was told I was having a heart attack, and you know what that situation is like. It's busy, and the doctors and nurses are coming, and all the equipment, and I was watching these nurses, both young and more experienced nurses whom I knew, and how calm and reassuring and professional they were. How do you teach that, or can you teach that?
We certainly try, and and we go about that in many different ways, and we certainly talk about the professional role of a nurse, and we begin with how we relate with others. One of our core curriculum themes within our program is people-centered care. And we start from there in terms of how you interact with the client, and recognizing their individual preferences and their values, and being involved in their healthcare decisions. I'm gonna let you guys jump in as well. But yes, we look at like the professional role of the nurse, and a huge component of that is relating with the individual and who they call their family members. So we are able to do that in the classroom setting, and also within our simulated environment, again with our actors, our standardized patients, I should say.
I think one thing, and I wanted to mention it earlier, but I think this is a good opportunity to do so. Respect is huge, and it starts in the classroom, to respect the opinions and values of the people who are sitting to your right and who are sitting to your left. So it's begins right there in the classroom, to respect your professors, to respect your classmates, and to have open and comfortable dialogue in which you're not being judged, but you are free to speak, and to express your values and your opinions. but also not just of your fellow nurses and the students in the classroom and your professors, but also to the greater healthcare team. Because, you talk about being a nurse, but a nurse does not work in isolation. A nurse works with a team of other healthcare professionals. And we have to share that with learners. I think learners really have an eye-opening experience when they see how much collaboration takes place between the nurse, the physicians, the OTs, the physio, the respiratory therapists, the dietitians, the rec therapists. The list goes on, because the Faculty of Health, when you list the number of faculties that exist in that department, it is huge. So one thing I think I'd like to share around respecting the roles of others is that every student at Dalhousie has to be educated to understand how to be collaborative and to respect the roles and diversity of other professions in which they're involved with. So they have interprofessional learning opportunities right from the beginning of semester 1 until semester 8. And they graduate with a certificate in interprofessional health education at the end of their degree. So they get their degree, but they also get a certificate in interprofessional health education. So, we expect students when they graduate to be part of a healthcare team and to collaborate and to work together to meet the unique needs of their patients. So we also have a responsibility to teach them that. And so that's part of our interprofessional learning opportunities that are created on site. And we have some really unique clinical simulations that we involve other healthcare professions, from dietary to OT to physio. And they happen in our skills lab, and they're wonderful experiences to be involved in.
And our students, there is the expectation that they do come to class prepared to be involved in discussions and activities. We incorporate active learning strategies. We may have videos of, say, for example, of interacting with a client, communication technique that didn't work, and then another scenario that shows that, a better way of being able to relate with the client. And also we use a different type of pedagogical activities, like arts-based and you name it. We're always switching it up and incorporating what we think is going to be effective and a great way to be able to get at that compassion and caring and empathy of what, those underlying attributes that we would want a professional nurse to exhibit. And our students also take an interprofessional mini course. It's called Introduction to Cultural Safety in Healthcare for Indigenous People. And this course actually attends to specific truth and reconciliation calls to action. And by understanding the historical events and the treaties and the landmark documents and healthcare and cultural safety, we begin to prepare not just nursing students, but Dalhousie University medical and dentistry students for the demands of clinical practice. And so again, looking at focusing in on Aboriginal healing practices, cultural competency training, and cultural humility for all healthcare professionals. And it is what came out of reconciliation to require all students to take a course dealing with Aboriginal health issues. And Joanne and I have both been facilitators in the course. It is an incredible experience to be involved within that course.
Phenomenal experience, very eye-opening, a lot of learning, personal learning for myself as well.
Yeah, every year, we learn more and more.
And I think this question loops right back to the importance of clinical practice. Because as Jackie and Joanne have outlined, we do lots of work in our simulation lab, our classrooms, but again, they need to get in and work with patients. So another partnership would help them increase their contact, increase their awareness of the interprofessional healthcare team, is a collaboration between the academic environment, the 3 universities in Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia Health. Yarmouth campus was thrilled to be selected as the pilot for this program last September. It's called the Early Immersion Program, and a student, once they've completed 440 hours within the program, can apply for a position, and it's a unionized position. So again, this is unique in our country, as far as I'm aware of, and it's called the undergraduate student nurse. They can apply for that position. They interview accepted. They immediately begin in the Nova Scotia Nurses Union, so they start with seniority as they go through the last 3 semesters of our program. But these positions are self-scheduling, and that is what's unique. So students, if they know next week's exam week, they're not going to take shifts this week. Our students are generally off all of April, August, and December, so they can work full-time in the undergraduate student nurse role. They have a clinical mentor that they're assigned to, which is a retired nurse in our province. So if they have some of those, nursing and kind of anything conflicting about the role come up, they have a mentor. They're also assigned an academic liaison to enable them, if they're having a hard time juggling perhaps academics and the work, how do I go about this? Because really the students, and the evaluation told us, the students were very pulled to do more shifts because they see the shortage of people in the clinical setting. So that early immersion program was conceived and began in Yarmouth and has now expanded throughout our province to all 4 zones. And there's over 200 undergraduate student nurses currently in that role in our healthcare institutions. So we were pretty pleased to be the starters of that in collaboration with Nova Scotia Health, and I'm actually the principal investigator, and we're on our last evaluation of that program.
So the Yarmouth campus has been the beneficiary of a lot of these pilot projects and unique opportunities. What has that done for your reputation over the years?
Well, I think about our legacy. Absolutely. We have had nursing education in this town for over 100 years. And, I think that speaks volumes that we have been involved in the business for a very, very long time, for lack of a better word. I think when you communicate with people from other provinces and countries, and you hear and you share where you have graduated from, we're recognized. And it says something to be a Dalhousie University School of Nursing graduate. It's very globally known university, and it comes with a lot of recognition. And I think people are quite proud of our graduates. I know we are.
Absolutely, and I know that, or I have the feeling that we are recognized as collaborators within our faculty. And we have always shared, if anyone has ever reached out, or we reach out to, whether it's Dalhousie faculty in Halifax or to Arctic College, that we will share the resources that we have. There is no copyright stamped on anything that we do. We are more than willing to, to offer and be support and mentor or whatever it is that we can do. And I think we am I correct that I believe we've been recognized for that amongst
and we're nimble. I think about the days that we use Jell-O and cherry pie filling in our SimLads to simulate hemorrhaging. Now we can buy blood and buy things. So we've come a long way.
I think it was tastier back then.
I don't look at cherry pie filling the same ever since then. But we're nimble and we're flexible, and I think we've made our mark in Big Dal. Because right now we have the history. When I look at Dalhousie in Halifax, lots of new positions coming, and we have the history of the program changing, and we're often, Dr. Ruth Martin-Miser is our current director, and she often looks to Yarmouth to either test maybe a pilot out or what our opinion is of something they're thinking of doing. So which wasn't always that way. We struggled in the early years because we were just diploma educators, but we were also students of the faculty we were collaborating with. So it was a double-edged sword, but we've come a long way, and I'm thrilled with what we have. I think most of the faculty thrive on change, even though that might sound odd. But nursing is always changing and evolving. So when a new idea, something new comes, it's like, do we want to try it? And there's usually a few faculty that are on board. And we've produced a fair amount of scholarship out of the school. And I know this isn't your question, but I got to say this. So we have to be accredited by the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing because Dalhousie is. We get approved by our province and then accredited. In the history of our school, we have never been able to meet full accreditation. We've gotten 5 years, we've gotten 7 years with some partially met key elements, etc. Our last accreditation, which was 2 years ago, our campus achieved every key element that every university in Canada who achieves full accreditation achieved, including scholarship and research output. So I was never so happy of this campus and this faculty. That's not only the faculty and the program, but also the educational unit. Because we do the full degree, we're held to the exact same standard as Halifax. So that was a real celebration for us, and we'll continue to meet those standards as we go forward.
And that comes from the top as well. Like Shelley has given us the support, the mentorship, the encouragement to expand. And so, a word of thank you to her as well, because it had to come from somewhere, and it siphons down.
We are very happy to be employed here, and we have great leadership. So we're very, very fortunate.
So we were talking a little bit about inclusion, diversity, and the like, but what about gender bias? Certainly back in my high school days when you were thinking about nursing, it was more predominantly female occupation. But has that changed and evolved over the year as well?
I certainly think it has, Quinn. I would hope any young man or woman, middle-aged or older, would look at nursing as a really exciting career with many opportunities. Our campus here pretty much reflects the national demographics of registered nurses in relation to male and female. There's still female dominance, absolutely. Is there bias? I hope not, but I'm sure there are some unconscious.
Maybe that was the wrong word to use.
No, you're right. There has been a history of gender bias for sure, and I'm sure there's probably still some out there as well as an unconscious bias. But at any given time, our population reflects national demographics, which is like 8 to 12% of males in our program. So, which is different than 20 years ago, that's for sure. But we hope that we have an inclusive environment for all genders, or even non-conforming genders. Like, we want to be seen as a place where you want to live and work.
And what about mature students? Do you see an uptick in folks coming, quote unquote, back into the school system after they've been out in the workforce for a few years and realize, you know what, I want to do this?
I think, like, I reflect back on, like, 36 years of being here, and I think we always had mature students within our classes. Actually, back to an example of one of our students entered the program during our 2-year program at 63 years old and graduated at 65, yeah. But we do, I think, we always have mature students within the. And I guess it goes back to, like, many times that someone that wanted to be a nurse, maybe in high school, potentially didn't have those credits that we talked about earlier, or that at age 30 or 35, which seems so young now to me, but that, make the decision then that, I'm gonna do it now. The time is right now, and I'm gonna do it. So, yeah.
Those mature students add a wonderful level of interest and diversity into our classrooms too. Like, their perspectives and their life experiences just add to the learning environment, and they're great mentors and support for the grads or for the students who are coming from high school, and it's a lovely setup.
So thinking about the multiple number of years that all of you have been involved with the Dow School of Nursing and the School of Nursing before Dow came in, Can you give me a bit of a reflection over your time here and give me a sense of maybe one or a couple memorable moments that you're the most proud of with your time here?
Okay, I'm going to struggle a little bit with this, but I think looking back, especially that's something that you do as you go to retire and you reflect back on your career, it's the relationships that we have built. And we met as co-workers. We did our Master of Nursing program together as students and supported each other that way. We have been there through each other's weddings or births of children, and also deaths of family members and death of important people in our lives in terms of faculty and colleagues we've worked with over the years. So to pinpoint it into one, I cannot.
And I don't mean to cheat, because I am going to cheat.
Yes, what she said, right?
But Jackie really struck a nerve with me when she's, an emotional nerve, I guess is what I want to say, because it happened during COVID. And we always have a wonderful faculty gathering around Christmas. And this time it had to be online. And so we did it virtually, and we put ourselves in one of those groups where you could see everybody, right? And we were all in a chair, and it was virtual. And I was so happy to see my colleagues. Now I'm going to get emotional. But that's when it hit to me that how much I love this faculty. Because I missed them, and we laughed, and we had so much joy that it became very evident that there was a void in my life during COVID, for sure. Yeah.
Wow, Quinn. I should have went first, because those are two hard acts to follow, and I am going to say ditto. And I'm also going to say that our new faculty people coming on noticed our environment. We are unfortunately not demographically reflective of educators across our country. We are full female faculty, but we respectfully debate ideas. We go with best evidence, what's best practice, what's best for our students. And we even say to the students, welcome to our family. I think 1 year, if I had to pick out 1 year, I'm going to pick 95, because 1995 was a transition year for us. Was I proud to be an instructor in a diploma school where I started my career? Absolutely. Was I scared to death when I started? Absolutely, because my instructors then became my colleagues. But 95 was a turning point. 95 was a point where we were just finishing our masters. We were graduating our last class of diploma students, and that was very emotional. Which was in the end of July of 95. We took in our first baccalaureate students September of 95. So we had about 5 weeks to transform, the way we thought, talk, etc. The graduation that year, and our diploma students usually graduated from Beacon Church. It was a huge ceremony. I was lucky and humbled to be asked to be guest speaker that year. And I can remember talking from the podium about crossroads, because they were at a crossroads. They graduated. Their lives were about to change. But we were at a crossroads. The diploma faculty was as close as this faculty is now. And we knew at the end of that graduation, this family was breaking up and going different paths. So I found an anonymous poem, and I'm not going to recite it because I can't get through it now without emotion. It was called The Magic of Caring. And I think that is when I cemented for myself that the career path I have chosen was the right one. If I had to do everything over again, I don't think I would change one day of one moment of being here.
Ditto.
But in that moment, you were scared.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That was, yes, I was.
And it's funny, when I reflect back, my idea was when I first received or had a good fortune to find out that I got the job, that I was coming here for 2 years, period, and then would go back, hopefully see if I could get into maybe applying in a nursing school in Cape Breton. and would like that.
still here.
I am still here. I never even thought twice about that after 2 years. So yeah, I think that speaks volumes to the two people that are sitting beside me and the faculty and teaching team that we currently have and currently continue to orientate and mentor in the new role of new faculty.
So if a young person is listening and thinking they'd like to embark on a career in nursing, how can they access information? And would they be able to speak with someone briefly, to get sort of the basic information?
Absolutely. I've been the academic advisor here since, I don't know, since a very long time. Let's put it that way. So sometimes we'll get questions. Students will call the main line and ask to speak to somebody. And by all means, always have my door open to answer any question that a student has about, what they need to get into the program. Sometimes they want to have a little tour. So we do that, and our site administrator certainly helps with that too. And they want to see what a residence room looks like and talk about the advantages of studying at the Yarmouth campus. So by all means, anybody who calls, we will gladly open our door and have a conversation. But all our admissions do go through Halifax, right? So Halifax has the registrar, Halifax has the admissions office, and that's where all the applications go. They do not come here, but certainly we can, communicate with them and set them on the right track. My email, yeah, sure, I can give out my email. My email is Joanne, JOANNE, .Newell, NEWELL, @dal.ca.
And I guess I'd just like to highlight not just young and old, older, just to emphasize that.
Especially in light of the massive scholarships that are available to residents of the Tri-Counties. Again, to reiterate, I don't know of any program that offers students entering full tuition for their program, especially the cost of post-secondary right now. So we're thrilled that Nova Scotia Health has provided those for Yarmouth campus students only.
We also have an excellent, and we're in the process of getting it updated, a YouTube video that shows, explores our campus. And that hopefully should be, our new version should be coming out soon. So
Stay tuned.
yeah, stay tuned.
Our guests have been Assistant Professor and Site Administrator Dr. Shelley Cobbett and Professors Joanne Newell and Jackie Hartigan-Rogers. Again, thank you so much for having us in the campus, and thanks so much for a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's been wonderful, absolutely.
I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.